My name is Jason DaPonte. Based on this giant logo, you might guess that I work at a company called The Swarm. I actually run the company as well. And I know some of you and have worked with some of you, so it's nice to see you. This is the Start Seeing and Playing with Data workshop. Emphasis on start because it's only an hour long, and so I can only take you so far, but hopefully it will give you some good inspiration to take back to your organizations and to your work. The way that this session is going to run is I'm going to take you through a couple of different projects that I've worked on with various different forms of taking data and making it visual and looking at what different purposes you can use data for. That's my proposed structure. You may have others, and you'll be able to work with those. Then we're going to look at a few examples, both good and bad, of data in groups so that you guys can get hands-on and play with stuff and see some different examples. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a sort of exercise to do in pairs where you can talk about how you might be able to start creating data-driven stories, data-driven experiences of your own. Talking about the case studies and the purposes, these are two projects that I've worked on where we used aggregating open data for entertainment purposes. The first one is called it's called The World Brain, and it's a game that we made, which I'll show you a short video of in a minute, and I'll explain what happens as we go. But it was to support a documentary that was on BBC4 and Al Jazeera and a lot of other public service broadcasters about what Google is doing with your data. And what we wanted to do there was engage an audience that doesn't watch highbrow documentaries with the themes of the film. So I'll show you how we did that. And that's a game. And then this is a project that was an R&D project that we did with The Other Way Works, who are based in the region here. And Katie Day, who's the artistic director there, wanted to look at what would it be like when your life flashes before your eyes just before you die if it was done through the lens of what you'd posted on social media. And so again, we were pulling together lots of different feeds and aggregation to look at how you could do that and then put that into a performative experience in a performative space. That's just R&D, so we've only done the feasibility on that, so I don't have anything to show you. But it just, what I want you to think about here is when we talk about data visualization and the talks about data downstairs, it's very easy to think about spreadsheets and think that, oh, I could turn the spreadsheet into a graph. But I want you to think about then, how could I turn it into a gaming experience? How could I turn it into a performative environment? How could I make it interact with people in ways other than looking like a management report? Management reports are good, by the way. I'm not saying, don't do management reports, but I'm just trying to push where this is going. So I'm going to show you the film of The World Brain video now. People came from Al Jazeera's Facebook feed, which is what this was, to play this game. And it was also advertised through social media in other ways. So actually, most people got it. It was something looking like a personals ad with this sexy robot saying, "Do you want to play with me?" or "Would you like me to seduce you?" And what we were trying to do was personify Google as this sexy robot that's constantly trying to seduce data out of you by saying, "Oh, do you want this feature? Do you want this functionality? Do you want to play this game? Give me more, more, more." And so she starts asking you some very seemingly simple, kind of harmless questions about things you've posted, what you looked like now, what you looked like in the past. And then she starts asking you who your friends are, and so it all seems quite innocent. And slowly but surely, she starts to get a little bit more sinister. Sorry, I'm going to put the sound up a little bit. She wants to ask you a little bit more. She wants to merge with you. And then suddenly, you start seeing that she's looking at where you are. And this is not done at my home address for obvious reasons. But she's not saying anything. But so we're now pulling on your Facebook data. We're pulling on your location. We're mapping that. So we're bringing all different feeds together. She starts asking you about which memories you'd be willing to lose and what's significant in your life. Then she starts hoovering up your photos. Then she's right over your house, and you can't really hear it right now, but there's three-dimensional sound, helicopter sound effects coming as well. And then
I feel we're getting closer. Don't you agree?
So you see the whole thing. And then eventually what happens, I think it's on the next screen, she she asks if she can sense her. She shows up outside of your front door using Google Street View's panorama functionality. And this scared the crap out of people because suddenly they were like, this is real. So that was all real data that we were using. Then we started to tell people that we were searching their criminal records, their medical records, their sexual history, their employment history, and people freaked out completely. So that's showing how you can use data that you don't really have in order to kind of build up the experience. But it also shows how we pulled a bunch of different pieces of data together into quite a, what I think is compelling entertainment experience. And then, of course, there's an obligatory graph because we couldn't make something like this without having a graph that you can share at the end. The second kind of purpose that I'm proposing is looking at finding connections and insights between sets of data. And this relates to the project that Henry talked about earlier in the day, where we connected data from the archive of the Grain Photo Hub at the Library of Birmingham with data from Flickr and Instagram, which are two what we were calling unintentional archives, social media archives, places where people are putting photography without thinking about making an archive, but it is an archive of sorts. And what we did is we put that into something that's called a graph database, which connects data that's only loosely connected, that's not all formatted in the same way. And it starts to build conceptual hubs. So we saw one about the Library of Birmingham, we saw one about the city of Birmingham, we saw one about Longbridge. And so that's quite interesting because you start to see patterns in the content and who and which, so which content and then which creators are connected to that. But then the thing that's really interesting to me is that this photograph and this photograph are both related to Library of Birmingham. Okay, well, I probably could have guessed that. But if you go one step out from there, you can also start to look at which users are interested in the same types of things, which then lets you start to do really interesting two-way outreach and lets you start to even potentially look at who is likely to be a person, an audience member, a visitor that will engage with you, who's likely to be interested in the upcoming exhibition you have based on what's there. And we've got all sorts of ideas for different types of tools, everything from exhibition software through to analytics and outreach tools, marketing purposes, that we think we can kind of evolve this into. So that's an interesting one that we've worked on. And then another example, which I'm not going to show you now, but I'll just reference because I think it's kind of amusing, but there's also a bit of journalism in it, is this project called Ghost Rockets. And it's a Swedish project. And it's the documentary makers who were involved used freedom of information to break out all of Sweden's UFO records. And there's actually a UFO agency in Sweden that keeps track of it, as there is in most countries, believe it or not. And so they've got all of these paper documents going back to the 1940s about reports of UFOs. And what we're doing is building a tool that will let people extract the data from the scans of those documents and then visualize that on maps, on timelines, on just about anything that they want, because we're building a plugin to Google Fusion Tables, which will let them create their own visualizations. And so that's a way of showing how sometimes you need to actually jailbreak this data in order to make it open and to get your hands on it, but you can potentially do something quite interesting with it, including hunt for UFOs. The thing that I should also mention about this is it's not just a total flight of fancy. There does actually seem like there's some sort of phenomena in the sky, not necessarily alien life, that's going on that is unexplained, because over Sweden there are so many of these reports of the exact same type of objects moving in the same way, in the same speed over the course of 60 years. So we may actually solve a mystery there. It's not just to be geeky. Another thing you can do when you start turning data into products and doing visual stuff with data, playing with it, is creating engagement. And in this case, we created an app that creates civic engagement. And it's called TubeTap, and what it does is take data about expected travel times on the Underground in London, and then it looks at your location when you go into the tube and when you come out of the tube, uses GPS data to look at which station you're at, and then calculate how long it should have taken versus how long it really did take. And if you're more than 15 minutes delayed, based on the policies of Transport for London, you're actually owed a refund. But it's really hard to get until you get this app, which submits the claim for you, and you get a little voucher in the post refunding your fare. So that's just showing how you can create, we called this kind of happy activism. People were getting we've just withdrawn it from the market because we didn't want to support it anymore, but people were getting like £100 a month back sometimes, depending on which lines they lived on and what was going on. So it just goes to show that, you know, what's sitting in a spreadsheet on a server somewhere can actually be turned into something pretty powerful. Another thing that we've been doing, which is thinking about how you can use data to make more data, which can then lead to making more work. And this is a project that we've been doing in conjunction with our partners in Scandinavia, including the Medea Research Lab at the University of Malmö. And what happens here is this is just a very simple mobile web page that lets you swipe between red, yellow, and blue. Very, very simple. And we've used it at different music performances, including at the Royal Danish Orchestra, to say to people, it's okay to use your phones during this performance, on silent anyway. And what we want you to do is just keep this little swipe thing to tell us how you feel as the music plays. So we start capturing data, live data about people's moods. And in some cases, we've told them what the colors mean in terms of mood, and in others we don't. And then what that happens is all that data gets aggregated onto a dashboard in the lighting booth, and the lighting techs drive the lighting based on the mood of the audience, so based on the feedback that they're getting live. And so in that way, we're able to create something that's new and different every time. And you know, that could potentially be automated, but at this point, you know, we haven't gone that far because it's R&D. I'll tell you in the name of R&D that we also tried to use it to capture the mood of people over the course of a day at a conference once. We told them what the colors meant so that everybody was reporting at the same time. And then we crunched all of it and tried to use it to drive the lights and volumes on a 3-man drum performance where one was red, one was yellow, and one was blue. Made no sense at all, totally fell over, and you know, hooray, we tried. So that's the purposes that I was talking about, just as a summary slide for you. And what we're going to do next is, who's got computers or iPads that they'd be willing to use in a sort of group setting? Hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. OK, great. So we've got more than we need. If you could kind of evenly distribute into 5 groups, I'm going to give you a couple of examples to look at, one per group. I'll put the URLs up here and help you get set up. And what I'd like you to do is just have a play with what you find on the URL and report back to the group in just 1 or 2 minutes, to the other groups in 1 or 2 minutes, what it was that you looked at, and what you thought was good and what you thought was bad. And I will warn you, there's some bad stuff in there. You may also want to think about what might be transferable to the cultural sector, or how you might use some of these tools in the cultural sector. So it's pretty informal, just a quick kind of have a look, have a play, and then feedback to the group about what you saw. OK?